The message came on a quiet Tuesday morning, and it changed everything. It did not arrive through radio waves or any signal that human scientists expected. It simply appeared, burned into the sky above every major city on Earth, at the exact same second, in every language spoken by every nation. Words of light, hanging silent and still, readable by anyone who looked up. You are invited to a peace summit. Come in good faith, and peace will follow. Come in war, and war will follow. The choice is yours. Below the words was a set of coordinates, a place far beyond the edge of the solar system, deep in space that no human ship had ever charted. For 3 days, the world did nothing but talk about it. News channels ran the same footage over and over, the glowing letters hanging above Tokyo, above New York, above Nairobi, above every capital on the planet, each in a different tongue but saying the exact same thing. Governments called emergency meetings. Religious leaders gave sermons. Children asked their parents if the aliens were going to eat them. Old soldiers who had fought in Earth's last great war, the one 7 years ago, the one people did not like to talk about, sat quietly in their homes and said nothing at all, because they already knew what an alien invitation could mean. That war was the reason humanity did not panic. 7 years earlier, a single alien scout ship had entered the solar system without warning. It had not come to talk. It had come to probe, to test, to see what kind of resistance a young species like humanity could offer. It attacked a research station on the far side of the moon, killing 11 scientists before anyone even knew what was happening. Humanity's response had shocked everyone, including humanity itself. Nations that had been arguing over borders and resources for 100 years found a common enemy in the sky, and for once, they moved as one. Within 6 months, a coalition fleet built from the wreckage of a dozen national space programs, stitched together with new weapons designed in desperate haste, had hunted the scout ship down and destroyed it near the orbit of Mars. It should have ended there. A single ship, destroyed. A minor skirmish in the eyes of whoever had sent it. But it did not end there, because that scout ship had been transmitting everything it saw back to its masters before it died, and what it saw was not a weak, unprepared species. It saw a species that could organize, adapt, and fight back within months of first contact. It saw soldiers who did not break. It saw scientists who built new weapons out of scrap metal in desperation. It saw a planet that, when threatened, stopped fighting itself and turned as one fist toward the stars. Nobody knew who had sent the scout ship. Nobody knew what they thought of what they had seen. For 7 years, the sky above Earth had been silent. Humanity used that silence well. Every nation on the planet, still shaken by how close they had come to losing everything to a single ship, agreed to something that had never happened in human history. They built one fleet, one army, one command structure that answered not to any single nation, but to a joint council called the Unified Earth Defense Command, headquartered in a fortress buried beneath the Rocky Mountains. For 7 years, humanity had trained, built ships, built weapons, studied the wreckage of the scout ship down to its smallest bolt, prepared for the day the silence broke. Now the silence had broken, and it had broken with an invitation to peace. Ambassador Elena Voss sat in the underground command chamber of the Unified Earth Defense Command, watching a hologram of the message rotate slowly above the central table. She was 51 years old, with gray threaded through dark hair she kept cut short and practical. She had spent the last 6 years as Earth's chief negotiator with, of all things, nobody, because there had been no one to negotiate with. Now there was. "It's not a trick," said General Marcus Reyes from across the table. He was a broad-shouldered man with a scar along his jaw from the Mars campaign, one of the few officers who had fought in the original battle and lived to help build what came after. If they wanted to hit us hard, they would have just hit us hard. We wouldn't have gotten a warning message written in every language on the planet. This is something else. "Or it's exactly what it says it is," Elena said. "A test. Come in peace, get peace. Come in war, get war. They're telling us flat out that our choice determines the outcome." "Then we choose peace," said Counselor Amara Diallo, the civilian head of the command. She was the closest thing Earth had to an elected leader now, chosen by the Joint Council to speak for the whole planet in moments like this. "We go to this summit and we offer peace, sincerely." "Agreed," Elena said. But sincerity and preparation are not opposites. We go in peace. We also go ready for war, both at once. Reyes nodded slowly. That's the only way to do this. If we show up soft, and it turns out to be a trap, we lose everything. If we show up as an armed fleet ready to shoot first, we prove to them that we can't be trusted with peace at all. We need to walk in there looking calm, and be ready to become something very different in half a second if we have to. It took 11 days to decide who would go, and 11 days to prepare them. The delegation itself would be small. 3 humans, traveling on a single diplomatic ship, unarmed on the surface, exactly as instructions in a follow-up message had specified once Earth acknowledged the invitation. Elena Voss would lead as chief ambassador. General Reyes would go as military attaché, technically without weapons but carrying 7 years of tactical knowledge in his head. And a third seat went to Captain Aidan Cole, a young pilot who had grown up on stories of the Mars campaign and had graduated top of his class in the new Earth Defense Academy. He was chosen not just for his flying, but because he had a gift that could not be taught. He noticed things other people missed. He noticed the way a person's shoulders moved before they lied. He noticed the smallest details in a room. Reyes wanted a set of sharp eyes at that table, and Cole had the sharpest eyes in the fleet. But 3 people on one ship was not the whole plan. Behind the diplomatic ship, hidden from any conventional sensor, humanity was sending something else. 7 stealth cruisers, built using technology reverse-engineered from the wreckage of the scout ship that had died at Mars, would follow at a distance far enough to remain undetected, but close enough to reach the summit location within minutes if they were needed. It was General Reyes's plan, approved reluctantly by the Council after 3 days of argument. Councillor Diallo had been against it at first. If they detect our fleet, they will see it as an act of war, she had said. We will have failed the very first test. If we don't have that fleet there, and it turns out to be a trap, we will have failed in a much worse way, Reyes answered. We won't get a second summit. We'll get an invasion. In the end, it was Elena who tipped the argument. We are not sending the fleet to attack, she said. We are sending it because a people who has been attacked once without warning does not walk into an unknown room, unarmed, and call that faith. We call it foolish. Real peace is not the absence of strength. It is strength that chooses not to strike first. Let us walk in there with open hands and closed fists, ready behind our backs, just in case. The Council approved the plan. The ship they built for the journey was called the Meridian, a sleek vessel painted white, with a single blue stripe running along its hull, a deliberate choice meant to look calm and unthreatening. Inside, though, it carried some of the best sensor technology Earth had ever built, and a communication array capable of relaying a warning to the hidden fleet in less than 2 seconds if anything went wrong. The night before departure, Elena Voss stood on the observation deck of the orbital station above Earth, looking down at the blue and green planet turning slowly beneath her. Reyes joined her, 2 cups of coffee in his hands, offering her one. Scared? He asked. Yes, she said honestly. Aren't you? Every day since Mars. He looked down at the planet too. But scared doesn't mean unready. We spent 7 years getting ready for this exact moment, even if we didn't know it was coming. Every drill, every new ship design, every night some engineer stayed awake, trying to figure out how their scout ship's engines worked. All of it, for this. And if it's really peace they want, then we'll be the best peace partners they've ever had, Reyes said. Because nobody respects peace more than a species that knows exactly what war costs. Below them, on the surface, 7 billion people were watching the news, waiting to see what would happen next. Some prayed. Some argued online about whether the whole thing was a hoax. Some simply went to sleep early, too exhausted from days of anxious waiting to stay awake for a departure that would not even be visible from the ground. Captain Aidan Cole spent that final night doing pre-flight checks on the Meridian, running through the same systems for the 4th time, not because he needed to, but because his hands needed something to do. He was 28 years old and had never left the solar system before. Nobody had. This would be the farthest any human being had ever traveled from home. You're overchecking the thrusters, said Naya Okoro, the ship's engineer, leaning against the doorway of the cockpit with her arms crossed. She had built half the systems on this ship herself and knew every wire in it. They were fine the first time. Can't help it, Cole said. First contact with an entire alien government, and my job is to fly the ship there without embarrassing the entire human species. Forgive me if I check the thrusters more than once. Naya smiled a little. You'll do fine. You've got the eyes for it. Reyes picked you for a reason. I know. Doesn't make it less terrifying. At 0600 hours the next morning, the Meridian left Earth orbit. 7 stealth cruisers slipped out of their hidden docking positions on the dark side of the moon an hour later, running silent, running dark, matching course at a careful distance behind the diplomatic ship. The journey to the coordinates given in the message would take 11 days using the jump drive technology Earth had built from studying the wreckage of the very ship that had once tried to destroy them. A small and bitter irony that was not lost on anyone in the command chamber. Those 11 days passed in a strange, quiet tension. Elena spent much of the time reviewing every scrap of intelligence humanity had gathered about the scout ship's origin, trying to guess at what kind of species, or species, might be waiting at the end of this journey. Reyes ran endless simulations with Cole, wargaming every scenario he could imagine, from full ambush to genuine peace to something in between. Naya kept the ship's systems running perfectly, humming old songs to herself as she worked, a habit that somehow made the rest of the crew feel calmer just by hearing it. On the 9th day, the ship's sensors picked up something strange, a faint gravitational ripple far ahead of them, the kind of signature that meant something enormous was out there, something far larger than anything human engineers had ever built. On the 10th day, they saw it with their own eyes for the first time. It was a station, if the word station could be used for something so vast it dwarfed entire cities. It floated in open space, built from a metal that shimmered faintly gold under starlight, shaped like a great ring turning slowly around a hollow center, easily large enough to hold 100 ships the size of the Meridian inside it at once. Around the ring, dozens of other vessels were already gathered, ships of shapes and designs that no human being had ever imagined, some sleek and thin as blades, others massive and armored like floating fortresses, all of them representing species that Earth had never even known existed until this moment. There it is, Cole said quietly, his voice hushed with something between fear and wonder. The Threshold Station. That was the name given in the final message they had received 3 days earlier, along with docking instructions and a warning that only the diplomatic ship itself would be permitted to dock. The hidden fleet, if there was one, should remain far outside detection range unless summoned. Reyes looked at the massive station on the view screen, jaw tight. They know we might have brought backup, he said. That instruction wasn't random. They're testing whether we'll try to sneak a fleet in close. Which means our cruisers are staying exactly where they are, Elena said. Far enough to be safe from detection, close enough to answer a call if we ever need to send one. Naya's voice came over the comm from the engine room. Cruisers report holding position, 40 light minutes out, running full stealth. They won't be seen unless something goes very wrong. Elena took a breath and looked at the golden ring filling the view screen, then at Reyes, then at Cole. Whatever is waiting for us in there, she said, we go in exactly as we planned. Open hands, steady voices, and absolute readiness, just in case those hands need to close. The Meridian adjusted course and began its final approach toward the great station, its white hull catching the light of a star no human had ever named, carrying 3 people, and the hopes, fears, and quiet readiness of an entire planet behind them. Ahead, the golden ring turned slowly, patient and silent, waiting to see which kind of guest humanity had chosen to be. The docking bay inside the Threshold Station was large enough to swallow the Meridian 10 times over, and still leave room to spare. Elena Voss stepped down the ramp first, with Reyes and Cole a pace behind her, and the 3 of them stood for a moment simply looking around. The bay was lit by a soft golden light that came from no visible source, the walls smooth and seamless, as if the entire structure had been grown rather than built. Dozens of other ships sat in their own docking cradles nearby, strange shapes belonging to species none of them recognized, and moving between those ships were the beings themselves. There were tall, thin creatures with skin like polished stone, and 4 narrow eyes set in a row across their foreheads. There were shorter, broader beings covered in fine feathers that shifted color as they moved, walking on legs that bent the wrong way by human standards. There were things that did not walk at all, gliding along on cushions of shimmering light. And there were dozens more, each species stranger than the last, all of them pausing to look at the three humans who had just stepped off their ship. "Well," Cole muttered under his breath, "we're definitely not in Kansas anymore." "Focus," Reyes said quietly, though even he could not keep the tension from his voice. A delegation approached them across the bay. At its center walked a being taller than any human, with pale blue skin and deep-set silver eyes, wearing robes of dark material that seemed to absorb the golden light around it rather than reflect it. When it spoke, the voice came not from a mouth in the way humans understood one, but from a small device worn at its throat that translated its words into perfect, careful English. "I am Vorun Thal," the being said, "High Speaker of the Caldronai Concord, and host of this summit. You are the delegation from the world called Earth." "We are," Elena said, stepping forward and offering a slight bow of her head, a gesture she had practiced for days, careful not to be too submissive, careful not to be too proud. "I am Ambassador Elena Voss. This is General Marcus Reyes, and Captain Aidan Cole. We come representing the united peoples of our world." Vorun Thal studied her for a long moment with those silver eyes. "You come armed with nothing but words," he said. "That is noted, and it is appreciated. Not every world that receives an invitation arrives so plainly. We were told this summit is about peace," Elena said. "We take that seriously." "Good," said Vorun Thal. "Then let us begin." He led them from the docking bay through a wide corridor that opened, after several minutes of walking, into an enormous chamber shaped like a bowl, its curved walls rising up around a central floor, where a great round table sat, large enough to seat perhaps 30 different delegations at once. Most of the seats were already filled. Beings of every shape imaginable sat around that table, murmuring to each other in dozens of translated languages, and every one of them turned to look as the three humans entered. Elena felt the weight of every eye in that room settle on her shoulders like a physical thing. She kept her spine straight and her steps even, and beside her she could feel Reyes doing the same, his hands loose at his sides, his eyes moving quickly and quietly across the room, cataloging exits, counting guards, noting who among the assembled species carried weapons openly and who did not. They were shown to 3 seats near the edge of the table, a placement that Elena understood immediately. Newest members, lowest in whatever hierarchy this Concord operated under. She did not let it show on her face that she noticed, but she noticed all the same. "Delegates of the Caldronai Concord," Vorun Thal said, taking his own seat at the head of the table, "I present to you the world of Earth, humanity." A ripple of murmurs passed around the table. Some of the beings looked curious. A few looked openly hostile. One, a broad creature with dark red skin and heavy armored plates across its shoulders, made a sound that the translation devices did not bother converting, a low growl that needed no words to understand. "That one," Cole murmured very quietly to Reyes, barely moving his lips, sitting 4 seats to the left, "doesn't like us very much." "I see him," Reyes murmured back, just as quietly. Vorun Thal continued, seemingly unbothered by the growl. "The Concord exists to bring order between the many worlds of this region of space. We have stood for 11,000 of your years, welcoming new species when they are ready, and holding the peace between those who might otherwise destroy each other. 7 years ago, by your reckoning, one of our scout vessels encountered your world." The room went very quiet. "That scout ship," Vorun Thal continued, "was destroyed. Its crew killed. This is not unusual. Scout ships are dangerous work, and their pilots know the risk. What was unusual was the manner of your victory. A species barely beginning to leave its own solar system, organizing within months to destroy a vessel equipped with technology centuries beyond your own. We watched. We debated for years about what this meant. Some among the Concord believed you should be destroyed before you grew stronger. Others believed you should be invited to join us. I am pleased to say the second view prevailed, though the vote was not close." Elena kept her expression calm, though inside, something cold had settled into her stomach. Some among the Concord believed you should be destroyed. That was not a subtle threat. That was simply the truth, spoken plainly, and she respected the honesty of it, even as it chilled her. "We are grateful for the invitation," she said carefully, "and we come in good faith, hoping to build a real peace between our peoples." "Then let us test that faith properly," said a new voice. It belonged to the red-skinned, armor-plated creature Cole had noticed earlier. It rose from its seat, towering even taller than Voronthal, its voice a deep rumble even through the translation device. "I am General Skarnfoss, of the Drathi Compact," it said. "I do not share the High Speaker's optimism. I have seen young species before. I have seen what they do once they believe themselves strong. Humanity destroyed a single scout ship, and now sits at this table, as though it has earned a place among us." "Earned it how? By killing 11 of our researchers first, and then killing the crew who came to investigate?" A murmur ran through the chamber. Elena felt Reyes tense beside her, but she raised her hand slightly, a small signal they had practiced together. "Let me speak first." "General Skarn," she said, keeping her voice level and steady. "Your scout ship attacked a research station of ours without warning and without provocation. 11 of our scientists died because a vessel from a species we did not know existed decided to test us with violence instead of words. We did not choose that fight. It was brought to our door. When it arrived, we defended our home, as I imagine your own people would have done in our place." "A convenient story," Skarn said. "It is the true one," Elena replied, "and I understand you have no reason yet to trust my word over your own suspicions. That is why we are here, not to ask you to trust us blindly, but to earn that trust, the same way any two peoples must, through honesty and time." Skarn's dark eyes narrowed, but he said nothing further, lowering himself back into his seat with obvious reluctance. Voronthal inclined his head toward Elena, something in his silver eyes that might have been approval. "Well spoken, Ambassador. The Concord does not expect trust to be given freely. We expect it to be built. That is the purpose of this summit. Not a single meeting, but the beginning of a process. Over the coming days, delegates from many worlds will speak with your delegation, learn about your people, and decide together whether Earth is ready to take its place among the community of the Concord." The summit continued for hours after that. One by one, representatives from other species approached the human delegation's section of the table, some out of genuine curiosity, some clearly sent to probe and test. A small, quick-moving species called the Fenrai asked eager questions about human art and music, seeming delighted by every answer. A cold, formal species called the Thren Assembly asked detailed and pointed questions about Earth's military capabilities, questions that Reyes answered carefully, giving true information, but revealing nothing about the 7 hidden cruisers waiting far outside the station. Cole, for his part, said little, but watched everything. He noticed how certain delegates glanced toward General Skarn before speaking, as though checking for permission or reaction. He noticed that Skarn's own aides never seemed to look directly at the humans, always at some point just past them, a habit that in his experience usually meant someone was avoiding eye contact on purpose, hiding something behind carefully blank faces. Near the end of the first day's session, as delegates began to file out of the great chamber, Voronthal approached the human seats personally. "You did well today," he said quietly, in a tone different from the formal one he had used at the head of the table. "Better than most young species manage on their first day." "Thank you," Elena said. "May I ask you something honestly, High Speaker?" "You may. General Skarn seems to believe we are a threat that should have been destroyed before we grew strong enough to defend ourselves. Is that a common view among the Concord, or an unusual one?" Voronthal was quiet for a moment. "It is not unusual," he admitted. "The Concord is not one single mind, Ambassador. It is many worlds, many species, many opinions, held together by treaties and shared purpose, but not by perfect agreement. There are those, like Skarn and his Drathi Compact, who believe peace is a weakness to be exploited by anyone patient enough to wait for it. There are others who genuinely wish to see your people join us in friendship. Which view prevails in the end depends a great deal on how this summit proceeds. I would advise your delegation to be careful. Not every danger here will announce itself as plainly as Skarn did today." "Is that a warning?" Reyes asked. "It is an honest observation, General," Voronthal said. I have hosted many summits in my long service to the Concord. Not all of them ended peacefully. I would very much like this one to be different, but I am only one voice among many, and I do not control what others may choose to do in the shadows of a place this large. He inclined his head again. Rest well tonight. Tomorrow's session will be more difficult than today's. He turned and walked away, his dark robes trailing behind him, leaving the three humans alone in the emptying chamber. That night, in the quarters provided for them aboard the station, small rooms with strange furniture built for bodies unlike their own, the three of them gathered to talk quietly, the lights turned low, uncertain whether the rooms themselves might be listening. "Skarn's not our only problem," Cole said, keeping his voice barely above a whisper. "I counted at least 6 other delegations today who wouldn't meet our eyes when they spoke to us. That's not a coincidence. Something's already moving under the surface here." "Voron Thal all but told us as much," Reyes said. "He's not the enemy, but he's not fully in control of this place either." Elena rubbed her eyes, exhaustion from the long day settling into her bones. "Then we hold the line exactly as we planned. Honest, steady, patient, and ready." "Ready for what exactly?" Cole asked. Elena looked toward the small viewport in their quarters, where the distant stars glittered coldly outside, somewhere among them 7 hidden cruisers waiting silently for a signal that she hoped, more than anything, she would never have to send. "Ready for whatever General Skarn and his friends decide peace should cost," she said quietly. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, apparently, will be worse." None of them slept very well that night. Outside their quarters, unseen and unheard, the corridors of the Threshold Station carried whispered conversations in a dozen alien tongues, plans being made in the dark by those who had already decided, long before the humans ever arrived, exactly how this summit was going to end. The second day began exactly as Voron Thal had promised. Worse. Elena Voss noticed it the moment she walked into the great chamber. The mood had shifted overnight. Where the first day had been full of curious murmurs and careful testing questions, today the air itself felt tighter, colder. Delegates who had spoken to the humans warmly the day before now avoided their eyes entirely. General Skarn Voss sat at his place with a look on his broad red face that could only be described as satisfaction, as though he already knew something the rest of the room did not. "Something's different," Cole murmured as they took their seats. "Everyone's acting like they're waiting for something to happen." "Maybe they are," Reyes said quietly. Voron Thal opened the session with less warmth than the day before, his silver eyes moving across the assembled delegates with something that looked almost like weariness. "Today," he said, "the Concord will vote on a preliminary matter, a formal recognition of Earth as a candidate world, pending further review. This vote does not grant membership. It simply allows the process to continue in good order." The vote took nearly 2 hours. Delegation after delegation cast their voice, some in favor, some against, most abstaining entirely, waiting to see which way the larger currents would flow before committing themselves. When it finally ended, the recognition passed, but barely, with Skarn's Drothy Compact and 11 allied delegations voting firmly against. "A narrow result," Voron Thal said, "but a result nonetheless. Earth's candidacy will proceed." Skarn rose from his seat immediately. "Then let the record show that the Drothy Compact formally objects," he said, his deep voice carrying easily through the chamber. "And let it further show that we will be watching this candidate world with great care." "Your objection is noted, General," Voron Thal said evenly, "as is your right." Skarn did not sit down immediately. Instead, he turned his dark eyes toward the human delegation, holding Elena's gaze for a long, deliberate moment. "Care," he repeated, "is something I intend to take very seriously." Then he sat, and the session continued, as though nothing had happened at all. But Cole had seen something in that moment that troubled him deeply. As Skarn turned back to his seat, one of his aides, a smaller, quicker creature who had spent the entire session standing silently behind the general's chair, slipped away from the group and disappeared through a side exit that Cole did not recognize from the maps they had studied before arriving. He leaned close to Reyes. "Skarn's aide just left through a door that isn't on our station schematic," he whispered. "I don't like it." Reyes's jaw tightened. "Keep watching. Say nothing yet." The session continued through smaller matters, trade agreements between other species, A dispute over shared mining rights in a system none of the humans recognized. Business that had nothing to do with Earth at all. But Elena found it hard to focus on any of it. Her instincts, the same instincts that had guided her through years of tense negotiations back home, were screaming that something was about to happen. It happened just before what would have been the midday recess. The lights in the great chamber flickered once, then steadied. A low tone sounded through the room, a station-wide alert that every delegate seemed to recognize instantly, judging by how quickly conversation died into silence. "What is that?" Elena asked quietly. Voronthal rose from his seat, his expression suddenly sharp with alarm. "A breach alert," he said. "Someone has forced open a restricted section of the station." He turned toward a group of armored station guards, standing near the chamber's main entrance. "Seal this chamber. No one enters or leaves until we understand what has happened." But it was already too late. The side door that Cole had seen Skarn's aide disappear through burst open, and armed figures poured through it. Not station guards, but soldiers wearing the dark red and black colors of the Drathi Compact, weapons already raised. At the same moment, similar shouts and alarms echoed from other parts of the massive station, distant but growing louder. "Skarn," Reyes said under his breath, already rising from his seat, placing himself half in front of Elena and Cole, in a movement so smooth it barely looked deliberate. General Skarn Voss stood as well, and this time he did not bother hiding his satisfaction. "The Drathi Compact does not recognize this vote," he announced to the stunned chamber. "We will not sit idle while the Concord grows weak, inviting every violent young species that stumbles into the stars to sit at our table as equals. Today we take this station, and we take this summit, and we will show every world watching exactly what happens to those who threaten the old order." Chaos erupted. Delegates scrambled from their seats, some fleeing toward exits, others shouting in protest, a few of the larger and more heavily built species moving to shield smaller delegations from the sudden violence. Drathi soldiers fanned out through the chamber, weapons trained on the crowd, clearly under orders to control the room rather than simply slaughter it, at least for now. Elena felt her heart pounding, but her mind, trained by years of crisis negotiation, stayed strangely clear. "This is exactly what we prepared for," she told herself. "Stay calm, watch, wait." Reyes leaned close to her, his voice low and urgent. "Elena, this is it. We need to decide, right now, whether to call the fleet." "Not yet," Elena said, forcing steadiness into her voice, even as chaos swirled around them. "If Skarn wanted us dead, we'd already be dead. He wants something else first. Watch and wait." She was right. Skarn's soldiers did not open fire on the fleeing delegates, though several were struck down with the butts of strange energy weapons when they resisted too fiercely. Instead, the soldiers moved with clear purpose, herding the remaining delegates, including Voronthal himself and the 3 humans, into a tight group near the center of the chamber, weapons trained but not firing. Skarn walked slowly toward the human delegation, stepping over an overturned chair, his massive frame casting a long shadow across Elena's face. "You," he said, looking directly at her, "Ambassador of Earth. I wonder what your species will do now, with its precious peace summit turned to war in a single moment. Will you beg? Will you weep? Or will you show me the same violence your kind showed my scout ship 7 years ago?" Elena met his gaze without flinching, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "Neither," she said. "We will wait to see what you intend to do with us, General, because unlike you, we did not come here planning violence." Skarn laughed, a deep, rumbling sound utterly without humor. "A pretty lie. No species reaches the stars without violence in its blood. I simply intend to prove that truth to everyone watching before this day ends." He turned to one of his officers. "Secure the chamber. Full lockdown of the station's primary systems. We will broadcast this moment to every world in the Concord, to show them what becomes of those who welcome dangerous strangers to our table." As Drathi soldiers moved to obey, Reyes caught Elena's eye, and in that single glance, years of training and trust passed silently between them. "Now," his expression said, "if there was ever a moment, it's now." Elena gave the smallest possible nod. Reyes's hand moved, so quickly and so smoothly that none of the surrounding soldiers noticed, to the small device hidden beneath the collar of his formal uniform, A communicator disguised as a simple ornamental pin, exactly as it had been designed to be. A single press, activating a signal keyed to travel not through the station's monitored systems, but through a tight, focused beam, aimed directly at the coordinates where 7 hidden cruisers waited, 40 light minutes away. The signal read simply, "Execute threshold contingency. Come now." It would take time for that signal to arrive, and more time still for the cruisers to close the distance, even with their advanced engines. But the message was sent, and now it was only a matter of holding on. "You seem very calm, Ambassador," Skarn said, watching Elena's face carefully, clearly disappointed not to see fear there. "Most young species beg by now." "We are not most young species," Elena said quietly. "You destroyed our research station 7 years ago expecting an easy, defenseless target, General. You found something else instead. I would think carefully before assuming today will go any differently." Something flickered behind Skarn's dark eyes, the first hint of uncertainty Elena had seen in him since the chaos began, but he covered it quickly with a scornful laugh. "Bold words for an unarmed diplomat surrounded by my soldiers," he said. "Words change nothing. Bind them," he ordered his officers, gesturing toward the huddled group of delegates. "All of them. We will hold this station until the Concord agrees to my terms, or until I decide this summit has failed permanently, in which case, I promise you, Ambassador, your world will learn exactly what real war looks like." Drothi soldiers moved forward with heavy restraints, beginning to bind the wrists of the captured delegates one by one, working their way steadily toward the small group of humans standing near the center of the chamber. Cole leaned close to Reyes, his voice the barest whisper. "How long until the cruisers arrive?" "Too long," Reyes murmured back. "We need to buy time." Elena, standing calm and straight, despite the restraints being fastened around Vorenthal's wrists just beside her, found herself thinking not of fear, but of the words spoken back on Earth's orbital station the night before their departure. Real peace is not the absence of strength. It is strength that chooses not to strike first. The choice, it seemed, was no longer entirely theirs to make. But as the first Drothi soldier reached out to bind her own wrists, Elena Voss allowed herself a small, private thought. They had wanted to see what humanity would do when war found them again. They were about to find out. The restraint closed around Elena's wrist with a cold, metallic click. She did not resist. Neither did Reyes, nor Cole, though every instinct in the general's body screamed at him to fight. They had trained for years for exactly this kind of moment. The discipline to wait, to endure, to let an enemy believe he held all the power right up until the instant that belief became his undoing. Around them, the great chamber had become a scene of quiet misery. Dozens of delegates from a dozen different worlds sat bound and guarded, some too frightened to speak, others muttering angrily to each other in languages the translation devices no longer bothered to convert, since no Drothi soldier cared to listen. Vorenthal sat with his silver eyes closed, his face a mask of controlled fury. A being who had spent 11,000 years of Concord history trying to prevent exactly this kind of collapse, watching it happen anyway in front of him. General Skarn Voss paced before the captured delegates, clearly enjoying the moment, his officers moving through the chamber setting up strange devices that Reyes recognized, from careful study of the station's layout, as broadcast relays. "You wonder what I intend," Skarn said, addressing the room at large, though his eyes kept drifting back toward the small human group. "It is simple. I will broadcast this moment to every world in the Concord. I will show them a young, violent species bound and helpless, and I will show them a high speaker who was foolish enough to invite such a species to our table. When the broadcast ends, the Concord will have a choice: support my compact's judgment and end this dangerous experiment before it grows any further, or watch as more worlds like Earth are welcomed in, until one day, one of them decides violence suits them better than peace, and turns against us all." "You already tried that," Elena said quietly. 7 years ago, you sent a scout ship to see how violent we were, and we defended ourselves. That was not us choosing violence, General. That was us refusing to die quietly." Skarn rounded on her, his massive frame looming close. "And what do you call this?" he demanded. "Sitting quietly while I bind your wrists and prepare to broadcast your humiliation to the stars. Is this also simply defending yourselves? No, Elena said, meeting his eyes without fear. This is us being patient, General. There is a difference, and I think you are about to learn it. Something in her tone made Skarn pause, just for a moment, but he shook it off with another scornful laugh and turned back to his officers, ordering the broadcast prepared. Cole, seated beside Reyes with his wrists bound, kept his eyes moving carefully around the chamber, counting soldiers, watching patterns, exactly as he had been trained. 23 Drothi soldiers visible in the main chamber, at least a dozen more stationed at the exits, based on the shouted reports still occasionally crackling through the guards' communication devices. The station's own defense systems appeared to be locked out, controlled now by whatever override device Skarn's forces had used to seize the breach point. Reyes, he whispered, so quietly it was barely a breath. How long since you sent the signal? 11 minutes, Reyes murmured back. How long until the cruisers arrive? Reyes did not answer immediately, and that silence told Cole everything he needed to know. It would be close, very close. The broadcast began a few minutes later. A holographic projector at the center of the chamber flickered to life, casting an image of the bound delegates, the ruined chamber, and General Skarn standing triumphantly before them, out across some channel that Reyes could only assume was being received on 100 different worlds at once. Peoples of the Concord, Skarn began, his voice carrying the practiced weight of a speech he had clearly rehearsed many times in his head. Witness what your high speaker has invited into our halls. It was at that exact moment that the chamber's lights flickered, and a new alarm, different from the breach alert, began to sound. This one carrying a tone of genuine urgency that even the Drothi soldiers recognized. Skarn's broadcast faltered as one of his officers rushed to his side, speaking urgently in a language the translators did not immediately catch, before switching hastily to a shared trade tongue for the benefit of the room. General, unknown vessels have entered the outer sensor perimeter. 7 of them, approaching at extreme speed. Skarn's expression darkened. Human vessels? Signatures do not match any known Concord design, the officer said, but given the timing. Impossible, Skarn snapped, turning to glare at Elena. You came with a single ship, unarmed. That was the condition of this summit. That was the condition of our diplomatic ship, Elena said calmly, holding his furious gaze. You never asked whether we brought anything else. Skarn's face contorted with rage, but before he could respond, the chamber shuddered violently, a deep impact rippling through the entire structure of the station. Alarms blared in earnest now, and through the great chamber's high viewports, distant flashes of light became visible against the darkness of space, the unmistakable signature of weapons fire. The 7 stealth cruisers of Earth's hidden fleet had arrived, and they had not come to talk. Reyes felt something close to relief wash through him, though he kept his face carefully neutral. The plan was simple in concept, though it had taken months to design. The cruisers would not attack the station itself, would not risk harming the hundreds of delegates from dozens of innocent worlds still trapped inside. Instead, they would target the Drothi Compact's own warships, the vessels that had escorted Skarn's forces to the summit and now hung in orbit nearby, ready to reinforce his coup. Through the viewport, Cole watched as the lead cruiser, a sleek, dark shape barely visible against the stars, executed a maneuver he recognized instantly, one he had trained on 100 times in simulation, a tight spiraling approach that brought it screaming past a Drothi warship's flank, while unleashing a full spread of precision munitions along its unshielded engine section. The Drothi vessel's drive flared, sputtered, and died, leaving it dead in space, powerless and drifting. They came for us, Cole breathed, unable to keep a small note of fierce pride from his voice. Of course they did, Reyes said quietly. We told you. We came ready for peace, and ready for war. You only saw the first part, General Skarn. Skarn rounded on the human delegation, his fury now edged with something that looked almost like fear. You will call off those vessels, or I swear every delegate in this chamber dies where they sit. I can't, Reyes said honestly. That's not how this works. Those ships have their orders, and their orders are to neutralize the threat to this station and everyone inside it. If you want them to stop, General, the fastest way is to surrender. Surrender to a species barely out of its own solar system, Skarn snarled. Surrender to a species that told you exactly what would happen if peace failed, Elena said. We warned you, General. Whether it was peace or war, we came ready. You chose war. Now you're finding out what that choice actually costs. The chamber shook again with another impact, closer this time, and through the viewport, the humans could see a second Drothi warship breaking formation, attempting to flee the engagement entirely, only for one of the human cruisers to peel away in pursuit, running it down with a speed that clearly startled every alien soldier watching. Voronthal, still bound but watching the unfolding chaos with sharp, calculating eyes, spoke for the first time in several minutes. General Skarn, he said, his voice cutting through the noise with quiet authority despite his restraints. Your coup has failed. Your own soldiers, watching this broadcast that you insisted on sending to every world in the Concord, now see exactly what happens when you provoke a species you claimed was too dangerous to trust. I would suggest you consider your next move very carefully, because every civilized world watching this broadcast is now judging not humanity's character, but yours. Skarn's soldiers, standing guard throughout the chamber, exchanged uncertain glances. Several lowered their weapons slightly, watching their general with expressions that had shifted from confident loyalty to something closer to doubt. Skarn stood frozen for a long moment, his massive frame trembling with barely controlled rage, staring out at the chaos of battle unfolding beyond the viewport, at the ruin of a plan that had seemed so certain only minutes before. Then, with a roar of fury, he turned back toward the bound delegates, toward Elena Voss standing calm and steady despite everything, and drew a heavy sidearm from his belt, aiming it directly at her. If I fall today, he snarled, I will not fall without proving my point first. Reyes moved before conscious thought even finished forming, throwing his bound body between Elena and the weapon, and Cole lunged at the same instant toward the nearest guard. Restraints or no restraints, years of hand-to-hand training taking over entirely on instinct. The chamber erupted into chaos once more, weapons fire, shouting, the desperate scramble of bound delegates trying to shield each other, all of it happening in the space of a single frantic heartbeat, as somewhere above the station, the battle in the stars reached its final, decisive moment. Time seemed to slow in the way it sometimes does in the worst moments of a person's life. Reyes felt the impact before he understood what had happened, a heavy blow across his shoulder that spun him sideways, and for one terrible second he thought Skarn's shot had found him. But the pain was wrong, too blunt, too solid, and it took him a heartbeat to realize that Voronthal, still bound at the wrists, had thrown his own body forward, driving his shoulder into Reyes and knocking both of them out of the line of fire just as Skarn's weapon discharged. The energy bolt struck the deck where Elena had been standing a moment before, scorching the metal black. Elena herself was already moving, dropping low and driving her bound hands upward into the wrist of the nearest guard, a maneuver from close combat training she had never expected to actually use in her life as a diplomat, knocking his weapon aside, just as Cole finished dealing with the guard he had tackled, using his own bound wrists like a club against the side of the soldier's head. Skarn denied his shot, swung his weapon toward Elena again, roaring something in his own language that the translator, caught in the chaos, failed to render into English at all. He never got the chance to fire a second time. The chamber's massive doors, the same ones through which Skarn's soldiers had first stormed in, blew inward with a controlled charge, and through the smoke and debris came a squad of Concord station security, reinforced now by soldiers from half a dozen different worlds, delegations that had fled the chamber earlier, but returned the moment word spread that the coup was collapsing under the weight of its own broadcast. Species Elena did not even recognize surged into the room, weapons trained on Skarn's remaining forces, and within moments, the tide that had seemed unstoppable an hour earlier simply broke. Skarn stood alone amid the wreckage of his own plan, weapons still raised, surrounded now by soldiers from a dozen worlds he had hoped to rally to his cause, all of them instead turning against him. Lower your weapon, General, Voronthal said, climbing slowly to his feet, despite his bound wrists, his voice carrying the full weight of 11,000 years of Concord authority behind it. It is over. Your own broadcast has ended your career, more thoroughly than any battle could have. Every world watching saw you threaten unarmed delegates, saw you attempt to murder an ambassador who came here in good faith. and saw a young species defend itself with the same restraint and precision you accused it of lacking, there is no argument left for you to make. For a long, tense moment, nobody moved. Then, slowly, Skarn's arm lowered, the weapon slipping from his grip and clattering to the deck. 2 Concord security officers stepped forward and took him into custody without further resistance, his massive frame suddenly looking smaller, diminished, as they led him away. Outside the station, the battle in the stars was ending as well. 2 of the Drothi Compact's warships had been disabled, their crews forced to abandon ship or surrender. A third had attempted to flee and been pursued and disabled by the human cruisers before it could escape. The remaining Drothi vessels, seeing their general's coup collapse and their fellow ships defeated, powered down their weapons and stood down entirely, their commanders apparently unwilling to die for a cause that had already so clearly failed. It took hours to restore full order to the threshold station. Delegates were freed from their restraints. The wounded, thankfully few, were tended to by whatever medical facilities each species could provide. Voronthal personally oversaw the process, moving through the chamber with quiet, tireless authority, and more than once Elena saw him pause beside a group of frightened delegates from smaller worlds, offering words of reassurance in whatever language their translators required. It was late into the station's artificial night cycle before Elena, Reyes, and Cole finally found a quiet moment together, sitting in the same small quarters they had used the night before, exhaustion settling heavily over all 3 of them. "We did it," Cole said quietly, still processing everything that had happened. "We actually did it." "We survived it," Reyes corrected, though there was no real argument in his voice. "Doing it, whatever that means for humanity in the long run, that part's still ahead of us." Elena said nothing for a moment, staring at her hands, still faintly marked from the restraints. Then she looked up at both of them. "Voronthal wants to speak with us in the morning," she said, formally, before the full assembly. "I think we're about to find out exactly what today's events mean for Earth's candidacy." That meeting came the next day, in a chamber far less crowded than before, though still filled with representatives from every world that had witnessed the previous day's chaos. Voronthal stood at the head of the great table, looking tired but resolute, his silver eyes moving across the assembled delegates, before settling on the 3 humans seated in their now familiar place, near the edge of the table. "Yesterday," he began, "General Skarn Voss and the Drothi Compact attempted to seize this station, betray the sanctity of this summit, and murder an ambassador who came to us in good faith. They failed, not because of Concord's strength, but because the world they chose to attack came prepared for exactly this outcome, and chose, even in the moment of their own captivity, to act with restraint rather than cruelty." He paused, letting his words settle over the chamber. "I have served as High Speaker of this Concord for longer than most species here have existed as spacefaring civilizations. In all that time, I have rarely witnessed a delegation conduct itself with such discipline, under such pressure. Ambassador Voss chose patience when violence would have been easier. General Reyes and Captain Cole placed themselves between danger and their delegation without hesitation, even while bound and outnumbered. And the vessels that Earth brought to this summit, hidden but ready, struck only military targets, sparing this station and every innocent delegation aboard it, even while under attack themselves." He turned fully to face the human delegation. "Earlier this cycle, the message sent to your world stated a simple truth. Whether you came in peace or war, that choice would determine what followed. I say to you now, before this entire assembly, that you came prepared for both, and chose peace at every possible turn, even when war was thrust upon you without warning. That is not the mark of a violent species, Ambassador Voss. That is the mark of a species that understands exactly what peace is worth, because it has already paid the price of war." A murmur swept through the chamber, and this time, Elena could hear something different in it than the suspicious whispers of the day before, something closer to respect. "I therefore propose," Voronthal continued, "not merely that Earth's candidacy proceed, but that it proceed with full recognition, effective immediately, of humanity's standing as a full and equal member of the Concord." The vote that followed was nothing like the narrow, contested vote of the previous day. World after world cast its voice in favor, some out of genuine admiration for what they had witnessed, Others simply relieved to see the crisis resolved with humanity's dignity and their own safety intact. When the final count was read, Earth's membership passed with an overwhelming majority, opposed only by a handful of delegations still allied with the shattered remains of the Drothi Compact. Elena rose to her feet as the chamber's attention turned to her, and for a moment, standing there before dozens of alien worlds, she found herself thinking not of speeches or diplomacy, but of the 7 billion people back on Earth who had spent the last several days waiting anxiously for news, not knowing whether the ambassador they had sent to the stars would return home at all. "On behalf of humanity," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber, "I accept this recognition, and I thank the Concord for its faith in us. I will not pretend that our history is free of violence, because no history, of any species in this room, truly is. But I promise you this: humanity did not come to these stars seeking conquest. We came because we were invited, and because after everything our world has survived, both among ourselves and against threats from beyond, we have learned that peace, real peace, freely chosen even when war would be easier, is the only kind of peace worth having. We hope, in the years ahead, to prove that promise true, one honest choice at a time." The chamber rose in something that might have been applause, or its equivalent among dozens of different species, a wave of sound and motion that swept around the great table, and Elena Voss, ambassador of Earth, allowed herself, for the first time since the invitation had appeared burning in the sky above every city on her homeworld, to simply breathe. The journey home took 11 days, the same as the journey out, but it felt shorter somehow, lighter, carrying news that would change humanity's place among the stars forever. When the Meridian finally slipped back into orbit above Earth, escorted openly now by the 7 cruisers that had once traveled hidden and silent, the entire planet was watching, holding its breath for word of what had happened at the edge of known space. Elena delivered that word herself, standing before the assembled Unified Earth Defense Command, and through them, before the entire watching world. "They invited us to a peace summit," she said, "not knowing whether we would arrive ready for peace or ready for war. We arrived ready for both, and when war found us anyway, we answered it with strength, and we answered it with restraint, and in the end, that combination earned us something no fleet alone could have won, a seat among the stars, not as a conquered people, and not as conquerors, but as equals." Far above the planet, the 7 cruisers that had proven humanity's readiness held their quiet formation in orbit, a silent promise to every world watching from Earth and beyond that whatever the future held, whatever summit or conflict or first contact, still waited somewhere out among the endless dark, humanity would be ready for that too. And on a golden ring of a station far beyond the edge of the solar system, High Speaker Voron Thal stood alone at a viewport, looking out at the stars, already wondering which world the Concord would need to invite next, and hoping, quietly, that it would prove itself half as ready as the small, stubborn, remarkable world called Earth.